haves and the have-nots have been as small as perhaps anywhere else on the calendar. Yesterday in practice, a second covered the top 23 overall. Of course, we've only got 14 riders automatically through to qualifying 2. 4 now could still join them. Involving some very illustrious names in this intermediate class. Here they are in full, with Tony Arbolino, the number 14, narrowly missing out on the top 14 yesterday. Albert Arenas, a former podium finisher here. He's also taking part in qualifying 1. It's one of 3 riders, actually, who are inside the top 10 in the World Championship, who we're going to be seeing in this session. Marcos Ramirez is another. Celestino Vietti is the other. He was down in 20th in practice yesterday. Also in this session we have front row starter from a week ago, Zonta van den Gorberg, Jorge Navarro, who's a former podium finisher around here in Moto2 and a Moto3 winner, of course. Ayumu Sasaki for the RW squad, teammate to van den Gorberg. Adrian Puertas, who impressed so many in Hungary last time out. David Alonso, the incredibly dramatic winner at Balaton Park, his first Moto2 victory. He was 23rd though in practice yesterday, not quite getting the hang of this Barcelona circuit on a Moto2 machine. Alex Escreech for the forward team. Eric Fernandez, a wildcard this weekend for the Farrell 55 squad. He's got a long lap penalty to serve tomorrow from wherever he qualifies. Mario Aggi, who's back in action this weekend for the Honda Team Asia squad, along with his teammate Yuki Kuni, Darren Binder for Grassini, and Unai Aradre for MSI. Those are your 15, of which only 4 will advance through to qualifying 2. That'll be Neil Morrison. We'll talk you through it. Elliot York is in pit lane, and Albert Arenas is in pretty high spirits, surprisingly so, given that he found himself outside the top 14 yesterday. Arenas, who took his worst qualifying since Sachsenring last year back in Hungary when he ended down in 24th place on the grid. A crucial 15 minutes coming up to avoid a repeat of that.
Yeah, it just didn't click with the Balaton Park 2 weeks ago, did Albert. One of his more difficult weekends of the year. Finished down in 14th, his second worst result of the season when he's managed to finish. But he isn't quite the biggest name in this session. That will probably fall on the shoulders of this rider here, David Alonso. We previously mentioned the Moto3. He's won the last 3 Moto3 encounters here in succession. And the last Moto2 race that we had in such spectacular fashion as well. In Hungary 2 weeks ago, coming through from 11th to 1st. A brilliant late attack, but Alonso has struggled to get going here and struggled to adapt his riding style to the demands of this circuit. The low grip conditions as well, I don't think have been helping, but we did see Alonso much improved this morning in FP2 compared to what we saw yesterday. He was about half a second faster in FP2 this morning than he had gone at any point on Friday. So he'll be hoping those improvements will continue in this session coming up.
No question, the rider who's perhaps most impressed in this Moto2 weekend so far, if you're just joining us for the first time, you are welcome. It's Alonso's teammate, Daniel Holgado, who we'll be seeing quite a lot of in qualifying 2 a little bit later on. Celestino Vietti, always a puzzling rider to predict. Former winner here, of course, in Moto2 back in 2022. On the weekend, which did begin with Vietti going through qualifying 1 and ended with victory. He'll do something rather similar in this session. Vietti, who had the mother of all shockers, I think it's fair to say, in Hungary last time out. Qualified badly, in fact his worst qualifying for 4 years since Aragon back in 2021 when he was 23rd on the grid. Of course, only made it about 200 metres into the race before he was knocked off at turn 1.
He'd be slightly deceptive, Vietti, being in this session, because he has shown some good rhythm across some longer runs, and we have seen some decent performances from a couple of the Bosses girls, most notably Jake Dixon and Ethan Guevara, who both already qualified into Q2. But Vietti, do not be surprised to see him come through this session and then qualify somewhere toward the front. It would be very like him to do that. He is one of a number of names to look out for. Alonso, another one. And Jorge Navarro, potentially a dark horse as well. Navarro has probably had one of his better weekends so far this season. He was up as high as 3rd at one point in FP2 earlier on today. So Navarro has decent speed and a decent track record here in years gone by. He's just holding back a little bit before he exits off pit lane.
Rossini duo looking around saying, anyone fancy joining us in this qualifying session as they go out on their own? We do already have a group of 7 or 8 riders who've gone out ahead of them on the racetrack in this session. And at the moment, Celestino Vietti and Tony Arbolino, who are sitting back and waiting. David Alonso likewise. Alonso does now leave pit lane. There he comes through the picture, the baby goat on the number 80. And generally, David Alonso does find himself in problems, and boy has he found himself in some in this Moto2 rookie season. He does generally solve those problems in pretty short order. Given where he was yesterday, as you say, there were already clear steps forward being taken earlier on this morning, and certainly something he was looking to achieve this morning was just to follow somebody who's perhaps got a little bit more experience around this circuit on the Moto2 bike, and he chose the fastest rider yesterday, Aaron Canet, to try and pick up some pointers.
He had a decent tow up ahead, and he was able to stay within reach of Aaron Canet for at least 6 or 7 laps before dropping a little bit back. But there were signs of progress. You were saying yesterday that you just cannot be super aggressive on the brakes here. Obviously there's some heavy braking zones, but you need to be very, very careful not to burn the front tyre out, as his teammate was doing at a certain point in practice yesterday. And he was just saying that trying to carry a lot of corner speed, especially in the final 2 rights of the lap, was really quite difficult for him. If you looked at the sort of sector times in practice yesterday, Alonso was losing half a second alone in that final sector. So there was a clear area to work on. Just was struggling to keep up with Aaron Canet earlier today in those final 2 rights as well. So let's see if he has managed to work on that, to crack the nut, and certainly all is not lost yet. But we're going to be seeing the full potential of the 2 Rossini boys just before that of David Alonso as they break down into turn 1 for the first time.
Darren Binder there was getting a little bit loose on his way into turn 1 as he was being overtaken by his teammate Albert Arenas. Arenas, on reputation and on championship position, certainly would be expected to come through this session. As mentioned, 3 of the top 10 in the World Championship in this session. Here is one of them, Celestino Vietti, a Boscoscuro bike which has been working fairly well so far this weekend. Certainly Tony Arbolino, fellow Boscoscuro rider in this session, feels that it might be the bike to be on over race distance tomorrow in this Catalan Grand Prix when they race over 21 laps in what is expected to be a punishing race for the tyres. Aaron Canet says it will be a management race tomorrow, and certainly the evidence of last year would back that up when we had a Boscoscuro in the form of eventual champion Ayagura take victory on that particular afternoon. We're going to make the use of some longevity and some race rhythm and consistency. I'll be applying that from deep down in the lower 20s on the grid, which is where you'll find yourself if you don't crack this session.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been speaking about some names that could well pass through this session and go on to play a bit of a starring role in Q2. Slightly negligent of us not to mention Zonta van der Gerber, because last time out in Hungary came through Q1 and managed to put it second on the grid, which was a bit of a surprise. He didn't quite manage to build on that in the race as he slipped back to 13th. Zonta saying even on the short straights, felt all season long that his body size and shape just isn't quite conducive to holding a strong top speed when it's compared to the likes of some of the smaller names at the front of this class, the likes of Diogo Moreira, Aaron Canet, David Alonso. So let's see if Zonta can repeat his Saturday heroics from 2 weeks ago here. Lewis just pointing out the top speed chart on our timing screen. Zonta already giving somewhere in the region of 11 kilometers an hour away down the front straight to Albert Arenas. So a perfect illustration of some of his current struggles.
Yeah, and that's not all down to just how the rider is twisting the throttle. As Smith pointed out, there is a lot more that contributes to it than that. Arenas did get a big slipstream from his teammate Binder down the main straight, but Van den Gorberg's losing 3 kilometers to the next slowest down the main straight. So of course, if you're losing that sort of time down the straight, you have to try and make it all up and take extra risks in the corners. But Van den But this weekend. Fastest lap time of the weekend was set earlier on today in free practice 2, a 1:41.897 for Danny Holgado. Arenas is 42.0 then, within a couple of tenths. The fastest way through turn 10, although I think someone's gone even slower through turn 10. In fact, someone's come to a stop in the gravel trap. David Alonso is not that rider. I think it did look a little bit of a hint of forward blue looking into the distance from that. It was some forward blue. It was the number 9 of Jorge Navarro, who does not have a lap time to his name, and by the evidence of that on our screens, isn't going to.
Yeah, real shame for Jorge Navarro. That will be back of the grid for him. And there is the fastest time of this session so far by David Alonso, not a million miles away from the fastest time of the weekend in Moto2. Just a tenth of a second off, or less than a tenth of a second from what his teammate Danny Holgado did earlier today. So Alonso showing yet again that as the weekend progresses, he is able to find these little tweaks to his riding. That is more than half a second quicker than what he's managed to do so far this weekend.
Well, myself and my girlfriend back home, one of our favourite hobbies is escape rooms. I feel like we need to invite David Alonso along, because he does appear to be Moto2's ultimate problem solver. No matter how bad it's looking for him earlier in the weekend, he just tends to figure it out, doesn't he? No better evidence of that than the Sunday in Hungary, when he was 11th on the first lap after a poor start and still came through to win the Grand Prix. He did say, didn't he, that he obviously still has these shortfalls, shortcomings on a new tyre in Moto2, but he also said, I just haven't figured out how to get these bikes off the line yet. And that's certainly something he's going to have to try and figure out when you've got a near kilometre run to the first corner, as we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. He was saying after the race in Hungary, just his small frame is problematic. To try and get the weight over the front end of the bike whenever he's starting is quite difficult to do, and therefore he's finding his front wheel coming up during the starts. He hasn't quite managed to perfect that. He hasn't quite make you think otherwise. He was saying you obviously can't be super aggressive going slow anyway, and he wasn't being aggressive enough, so it's somewhere finding a bit of a balance in between for Alonso, and he's still yet to perfect that. But we were saying earlier in the weekend, weren't we, Lewis, that once he does manage to get his qualifying completely nailed and sort out his starts, he will be a real formidable competitor in this category. I would not be surprised to see him win more races, especially when we're going overseas. We know from his debut season in Moto3 how quick he was going to the overseas races for the first time. I think he'll be adding to his win tally before the season is out.
The session looks to be over already for Jorge Navarro. That's not the motorcycle he wanted to be completing this session on. He's going to be starting at the back of the grid for tomorrow's Catalan Grand Prix. And a real shame, as Neil mentioned, because there have been signs of potential for Navarro. Fortunately, that is the second crash of the weekend for him. Chasnino Vietti then coming in third place. It's Calex, Boscoscuro, Calex, your top four. But it is super tight. Van den Gorberg in fourth has got 6 thousandths over Ramirez in fifth, who in turn has got 16 thousandths over Achi in sixth, who's got 4 thousandths over Huertas in seventh.
What's going on with the rider in eighth? Tony Arbolino on course to qualify down in 22nd for the second race in succession. It's been a bit of a miserable time for Tony. Aside from that brilliant fifth position in the Red Bull Ring 3 weeks ago when he came through to fifth, it's been a bit slim pickings really to look at the highlights from this year for him. Not really been a straightforward weekend either for the Italian. As you can see, not anywhere close to challenging the leading names in this session so far, so question marks surrounding Tony Arbolino continue to swirl, and slightly disconcerting to see both him and his team lament the fact that he's still suffering from these forearm problems. His right arm is going a little bit numb in some of the races. Some arm pump issues that he has been suffering from the very start of this season still have yet to be solved. So Arbolino facing a complicated final 5 minutes here, and looking a bit resigned there to his fate.
It looks like a rider who's going to be quite glad to see the back of the Boscoscuro at the end of this season. Just has not gelled with that chassis at all this season. We're still awaiting official confirmation in the form of a press release, but the expectation is that he's going to be back on the Calex next season with the Fantic team. Would certainly on paper be a pretty spicy combination, Tony Arbolino and Barry Baltas. That's for 2026. Here and now is about looking at placing qualifying 2 into that top 4. And as I mentioned, the riders who are so close to the top 4, the riders 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th, all on 142.2s. That does include the rider in 6th, Mario Aggi, who does make his return to action this weekend. Good to see him back, of course, after a second season in Moto2, which has been plagued with shoulder problems, dislocations, blighting his first half of this season. The dislocated shoulder that he suffered from on the warm-up lap back in Jerez was ultimately the final straw. He did try and come back briefly at Silverstone before withdrawing, where I think his shoulder popped out again on his first lap of free practice, went under the surgeon's knife, and has finally been able to make his return to action this weekend, and was able to report no pain or discomfort at the end of practice yesterday. And as Neil pointed out, he said earlier this morning that Aggi had been making some positive strides in amongst all of those physical issues in the first half of Moto2, and if he can book his place in qualifying 2 here, which he only needs to improve by 200ths of a second to achieve it, that would represent a serious achievement for the Indonesian.
Yeah, most certainly would. Obviously a very important date in his diary coming up in 3 weeks' time. This year's Indonesian Grand Prix. That is Alex De Angelis just on the left of the screen there. Tony Arbolino maybe hoping for a bit of a tow from a rider, but realises with only the wildcard Fernandez behind him that it is time to just get the head down and set this time himself. Arbolino, thinking back to the last couple of years, it hasn't always been a brilliant track for him. Remember last couple of visits with Marc VDS really struggling here. I think his sign-off from the Marc VDS team at the end of last year was nothing short of disastrous when he struggled to get in the points. We see Jorge Navarro looking pretty defeated after crashing out down to turn 10. He's going to be the back of the grid, unfortunately, for him tomorrow. As we look at Arbolino, what's he doing sitting up here?
Yeah, well, he'd already lost 3/4 of a second through the first sector, and certainly it wasn't Eric Fernandez that cost him that time to slipstream him down into turn 1. But Arbolino feels as if he's in a battle with himself as much as he's in a battle with his Boscoscuro and with the racetrack. Currently, as Neil mentioned, set to start 22nd on the grid, and that's not going to improve on this current lap. If anything, it's going to get worse with the lengths of Skridge improving behind him. Yuma Sasaki's also on a personal best. He's 1 place behind Arbolino, currently in 9th. Vietti could be about to take over at the top, and won't be a million miles away from the all-time lap record here, which would be so Celestino Vietti, wouldn't it, if he's to achieve this. Here he is on the number 13, ahead of a Skridge, who might have put himself in the perfect position on track to pinch a Q2 place. Will follow the 2022 Catalan winner through the final corner. All-time lap record is a 1:41.894. Sergio Garcia last year. Celestino Vietti has now beaten that. Typical Celestino.
Yeah, it really is. We'll have to see if that lap time stands. It looked as though he was right on the edge of the track limits as he was coming up the hill through turn 7 and turn 8. The inside of turn 8, maybe he just touched the green, although I'm not too sure. He might have measured it to perfection. If not, though, Vietti has just set a new all-time lap record, which bodes very, very well for the rest of his day. Brilliant stuff for him. Nearly 2/10 of an advantage now he has over David Alonso. Yuma Sasaki manages to improve his time at 42.159. Good stuff from Yuma. He's been showing signs that he is working this Moto2 game out. And there we have it. Lap time cancelled for number 13 due to track limits.
So the all-time lap record of Sergio Garcia is reinstated once again. So Vietti now back to 3rd place. Sasaki taking that 4th place away from Skridge. Here he is on the number 11, who was briefly up into 4th place. He's 0.08 of a second outside of Sasaki's current 4th place time. And of course, with the checker flag now out, Skridge has been officially bumped out. There are still others, though, who could still change that through the first sector. Binder has set a personal best. So too is Oradre, Marcos Ramirez, Mario Aggi, and Yuki Kuni. Although the first sector could provide some false hope for some, because of course it is a very, very short sector. It only takes in the main straight and the first two corners. But key moments here for Marcos Ramirez, of course, disqualified from this Grand Prix last season for running his teammate Joe Roberts' rear tyre. I don't think any rear tyre selection can rescue his weekend if he qualifies down in 21st.
Yeah, Ramirez yet to finish inside the top 10 since the season restarted after the summer break. He's been 12th and 11th in each of the last two appearances. It looks as though he's not going to make the cut into Q2 either. His lap time has gone away in sector number 3. Darren Binder is on for a decent improvement. His brother has been looking right towards the sharp end of MotoGP standings this weekend, and he's going to try and make it a bit of a family affair here as he comes out of turn 14. Comes across the line to take the checkered flag. Alonso doesn't manage to improve. Ramirez does in time, but not in position. And Darren Binder, unfortunately, you can see how much time he was losing in that final sector. 13th, an improved time, but unfortunately not in position. So Darren's current struggles, unfortunately, are continuing.
So the exceeding of track limits for Celestino Vietti did not cost him anything in the end, apart from the honour of an all-time lap record, but he is still through to Q2. And David Alonso, he's already proven, hasn't he? And it's going to take an awful lot more than a slightly iffy Friday to throw him off his stride. Quickest in qualifying one with the second fastest lap of the weekend, only bettered by his teammate earlier on today, Danny Holgado. Senna Regis, in fairness, who was second quickest one, was also a smidge quicker. The point still stands that Alonso is much closer to the pace that he would expect to be on. Albert Arenas second quickest, and you might want to thank his teammate for that, because it was on that very first time lap when he got a tow down the main straight from Darren Binder that propelled Arenas to second place. Vietti third. Track limits violations or not, he had done enough, and Yumi Sasaki will certainly take some pride from that to take that fourth place, and qualifying his teammates onto Van den Gorberg, who was on the front row for the Solidarity Grand Prix at the end of last season. Escridge fifth for the forward team on a day when his teammate Jorge Navarro set no time. Ramirez only sixth from Van den Gorberg, Angie Quietas and Tony Arbolino 10th in that session. Unfortunately for Tony, that spells 24th place on the grid tomorrow.
Yeah, disastrous. Absolutely disastrous for Tony Arbolino. Difficult to imagine that was the rider that finished second in the World Championship 2 years ago, but we haven't seen too much evidence of that. All those talents in 2025, unfortunately, will be over to his teammate, and several other names on the Bossexgro chassis to vie for pole position in the session that's coming up, including Celestino Vietti. But David Alonso has been improving little by little so far today. Half a second faster this morning than he was yesterday, and then another half second faster to top this Q1 session here.
Just how far can he go in qualifying two then? Alonso quickest from Arenas, Vietti and Sasaki, those are you four that moved through. Alex Escridge, 8 thousandths outside a Q2 appearance in fifth from Ramirez, Van den Gorberg, Angie Quietas and Arbolino. Unai Aradre 11th for the MSI squad ahead of Yuki Kuni, Darren Binder, Eric Fernandez, the wild card. And of course, Jorge Navarro, who set no time after a crash very early on in qualifying one. It's been a very strong weekend for Aspar so far in Moto2. It continued in qualifying one with Hungarian Grand Prix winner David Alonso on top. Can he convert that into potentially pole position in Q2? Find out next. Welcome back to Barcelona. We are 1 hour away now. Set your countdowns. Make sure your alarms are set. Watch it synchronised because you do not want to miss the Tissot Sprint. 15th of 2025. Potentially a key sprint in deciding not who's going to win the MotoGP World Championship, but when he's going to win it. with Marc Marquez, of course, looking to tee up a match point at Misano in a week's time. Give away the outcome of qualifying earlier on today. But suffice to say that the Marquez brothers are going to be in the thick of the action in the sprint later on. The sprint, of course, that they have between them won every single one so far of this season. So many of the fans here in Catalonia are here to see them. They have painted the grandstands red for the 93 and blue for the 73. Of course, a home Grand Prix for both. Before we worry about that and the 12 laps that lie in store for us in just under an hour's time, we need to decide who starts from pole position in Moto2. It's going to be one of these names. Aaron Canet quickest yesterday. That doesn't necessarily tell the full story of how his Friday went. Danny Holgado has looked absolutely superb so far this weekend. He has set the fastest lap of the weekend, first legal lap at least, because Chelsea Vietti did beat his time. Had set a new lap record in Q1, only to lose it for track limits. Jake Dixon third overall, ahead of Danny Munoz, the IO replacement, fourth yesterday at a circuit which we know he goes well around. Diogo Moreira, who seems to go fast anywhere he goes at the moment in Moto2. MotoGP might be where he's ultimately going in the very near future, with strong reports that he's heading in the direction of LCR Honda next year. No official confirmation yet, but that is certainly where the smart money is being placed. Colin Vyer on the second of the IO machines was sixth yesterday, ahead of Ivan Artola, Joe Roberts, Ethan Guevara and World Championship leader Manu Gonzalez, although again 10th place doesn't quite sum up how he went yesterday, because his race rhythm looked especially strong. So too did his teammate Senna Regis, who was 11th, Alonso Lopez, Barry Baltas, Philip Salach, and your top four from qualifying one. Esteban Alonso fastest of them all in qualifying one, joined by Albert Arenas, Chelsea Vietti and Emu Sasaki for qualifying two, which will be covered by sort of Neil Morrison alongside me and Elliot York in pit lane, and of course he'll be speaking to the pole sitter in Park for May. And when Aaron Canet was asked by our colleagues in the broadcaster set yesterday, he said, if I get what I need from the bike, then I know what I can achieve. When he was asked if that was pole position, his one-word answer was yes.
Yeah, never one to lack a bit of self-confidence is Aaron Canet, and why should he? He was the victor here the last time we went racing at the end of the 2024 season. Canet won the race brilliantly from Manu Gonzalez, Diogo Moreira, the two names that he just happens to be fighting in the World Championship this year. There's some mixed allegiances there in the grandstands. Yeah. Both Danny Holgado and Aaron Canet receiving the affections of those two fans.
Both will be fancying their chances of seeing their heroes succeed this afternoon. Yeah, Aaron Canet was fastest overall yesterday, even if it did appear to be something of a one-lap wonder. But Danny Holgado, just about every time we've seen him on screen, he's been impressing us.
He has, yeah. The only concern is that he ate up his front tyre in the early stages of a longer run, or what was supposed to be a longer run yesterday afternoon in practice. So one or two concerns about whether Holgado can really be competitive once the grip goes down and the tyres start to wear. You have to imagine Diogo Moreira will be there. He's not necessarily been the fastest name, but what has been key is just to check the kind of consistency, especially later in the longer runs. And Moreira was quite far away from the fastest names yesterday, but he was very consistent. We didn't see a big drop from him either. So Moreira has been really, really good on Saturdays in the last couple of weeks. 2 front rows on the points, and he'll be going again for the front row here.
Well, it has been a good news weekend for the Liquimoli Dynavolt Intact GP squad so far this weekend. They welcome back Senna Aetius from injury, and they've confirmed Manu Gonzalez to stick around for 2026. Let's discuss those topics now with Jürgen Ling, who's with Ellen Pittman.
Yeah, 2 reasons why I wanted to speak to Jürgen. Jürgen, good to see you here in Barcelona. The bikes are just to head out, so apologies in advance for the noise. Let's start with Senna welcoming the Australian back to the ranks. How's he feeling fitness-wise? And he's looked pretty good this weekend, straight into Q2 and on the pace. He looks quite good as well.
Yeah, he's looking good so far. Even he's not 100% okay, but it's better as expected. For a few laps, he's very competitive. For the race distance, gonna be tough for him, but he's is a strong Aussie, so he will manage it somehow. We are quite happy with his comeback.
And on the other side of the box, of course, Manu finally now confirmed to be staying with you guys in 2026. I'm sure the team, I know from speaking to you, are really, really happy about that and excited first for this year, but also a title push next year as well. How's the feeling in the camp on Manu's side of the box now his future is confirmed?
It's really good for all of us. We are super happy and excited that we can have another year with him, because the spirit and the mood, everything is super, super good. And I have also the deepest respect from him, how he accepts that he cannot have this a MotoGP seat. So for him, he's done, and he said, now I focus 100% on Moto2. This is super, super professional. So we are more than happy.
I wanted to ask about that. Obviously, there was a lot of speculation, a lot of talks about Manu's future, especially after his really impressive test in Aragon on the Aprilia MotoGP bike. So how has he handled that? It sounds like he's now just put it in the past. Was he sort of upset at all? I guess now he can just full focus on this year.
Yeah, it's for sure his big target was the MotoGP, and we really try to help him. We give him also more time to figure out something, because there was an option in the contract, so we give him all the time he needs, but at the end it doesn't work out. But as I said, in the first moment he was a bit disappointed, but in the next step he said, okay, this is how it is, and I will improve even more and will show my potential even more for 27. And I said to him, it's maybe better for you also, because with the new tires, with the new bikes, I think the Moto2 rider in 27 can be a big surprise.
And staying with you guys isn't a bad thing at all. Jürgen, good look for this session and tomorrow's race as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks Elliot, thanks as well to Jürgen Ling, team boss of Intact GP. You could just see Manu Gonzalez wasn't too keen to let David Alonso follow him around. He was slowing in that final sector to make sure that the number 80 wasn't just behind him. I caught up with someone from the Intact GP squad on Thursday, and they said there was about maybe half a day that they noticed that Manu Gonzalez was really down in the dumps when he got word through that one MotoGP factory would not be picking up his services for next year. Half a day, and then after that he was back concentrated, behaving as he normally was. And you have to say full respect to him. He hasn't shown any signs of real bitterness at losing the shot at racing the MotoGP next year. And as Jürgen was saying, I mean, win the championship this year, defend it successfully at the start of next year, and I'm sure there'll be more than one MotoGP factory knocking on his door for 2027.
Speaking of 27, we pick up Danny Holgado now, who's exiting the final corner. He's been in the 41s already this weekend, and look at that immediately, a 1:41.762. That is officially a new all-time lap record for Danny Holgado, although Jake Dixon looked like he was going quicker than him partway through his lap. Look at that. Dixon goes to top spot now. Holgado held the lap record for all of about 15 seconds before the Boscoscuro of Dixon, a former winner here, of course, takes top spot.
Yeah, former winner, former podium finisher as well. Dixon was third place in the first race that we had here last year, I should say. Brilliant stuff from him straight out of the box. He was saying yesterday that if we can make one or two small improvements with the setting, one or two small improvements with his riding, we'll be there or thereabouts, to use his words. There or thereabouts, he most certainly is. So Dixon, new lap record, and on provisional pole.
41s, and also under the previous lap record on a place on the 21 bike. That would be his best qualifying of 2025. Salach fifth from Guevara in 6th. So we've got Boscoscuros at the moment, 1st, 4th, 5th and 6th. They've come out of the box firing in this Q2 session.
Yeah, they very nearly rounded out the podium here in the first race of 2024. Only Fermin Aldeguer's mistake in the long lap penalty lane prevented that, but they finished 1 and 2 anyway, with Ayagura and Sergio Garcia when we came racing here back last June. And you can see Holgado just making a bit of a mess of turn 13 there. Ran it out over the track limits, I think, as well. So I don't think this lap will count for the number 27 as he improves, but it did look as though he touched the green there. But Holgado still coming out swinging. What's been so notable about this session, about this weekend so far, is at the very start of each session, Holgado has really been able to lay down a scintillating pace from the get-go.
Yeah, he's been in really good form this weekend. I don't know whether he is smart at all. Don't know if he's that kind of character, really, from Alonso's victory in Hungary. He is still the top rookie in the World Championship, even if his thunder was stolen a little bit by his Colombian teammate at that Spa last time out. Here comes Manuel Gonzalez, who's not exactly putting Jake Dixon's pole position time under any great threat. 3/10 off at the third checkpoint. This might only move him up a row on the grid. 2 rows as it is in the end. He goes up onto row 2 in 6th, and Senna Age is backing up the promising form we've seen from him in practice so far. He briefly went 4th, although the lap times continue to tumble around. It's now Salac and Kinet ahead of him on row 2.
Yeah, good stuff from Salac, making it double delight for Marc Vidies so far in this session. Yesterday, Kinet was saying that he was having a lot of problems stopping the bike, and you could see that into sector number 1. He was 25th in the sector times in sector 1 yesterday in practice. Today, he was 5th in sector 1, which makes me think that they've found the cure for some of those braking woes that he was having yesterday. So that is reflected in the times we've seen so far. Kinet currently in 5th, a solid opening to qualifying so far.
Haven't seen anything particularly outstanding from Diogo Moreira so far, as we now pick up the Brazilian on the number 10. 17th on the grid would represent something approaching a disaster, really, for Diogo, who, of course, has had some rather iffy qualifyings as of late. Not exactly all down to himself. Of course, qualified and started right at the back in Brno, and he, of course, picked up an injury and a penalty at the Sachsenring. Of course, qualified way down the field at the Sachsenring due to the wet conditions we had on that Saturday. In terms of a dry qualifying, he got all the way back to Austin back in round 3 for the last time Moreira was as low down on the grid as that. And it's not being punished in full, given that Kinet and Gonzalez are only 5th and 7th, but surprise of this Q2 session so far.
So Dixon, Holgado and Baltus, your top 3 so far, with Salac, Kinet and Lopez. Lopez has been an interesting one. I think it's fair to say he's got speed, but on his longer run yesterday, that consistency was very much lacking, and you could see him losing big amounts of time as his longer run progressed. One of the names that seemed to be kindest on tyres was Senna Aegis in yesterday. Where was he? He was somewhere up towards the sharp end. 11th place he was at the end of play yesterday, but his longer race run looked very impressive. So if Aegis can qualify on the first 2 rows of the grid here, you'd have to say he'll be fancying his chances.
Well, pretty easy to see there on the split times where Vietti was losing a lot of his time. Sector 2 for Chelle, he was giving up 0.3 of a second of his deficit to Dixon. He's just under 0.6 of a second down over the full lap, so a pretty clear shortcoming in Vietti's armoury at the moment, although we certainly know he's got the pace to put himself right up in the mix for pole position, as he said, a 41.7, albeit with some track limits violations sprinkled in qualifying 1. So Vietti down in 11th place. Alonso, who of course followed him through qualifying 1, he's currently in 12th place. Of course, he was about in that sort of area after lap 1 in Hungary. He still went on to win the Grand Prix as Jake Dixon and Yvonne Artola lead the pit lane, and I think Jake Dixon was, in a very polite British fashion, was inviting Artola to go through and not follow him.
I'm sure that was the language he was using underneath his crash helmet. Absolutely sure of it. And I think we can actually get a little bit of an update on the rider that is currently fastest in this session. The Jake Dixon update from Elliot in pit lane. Yeah,
I saw Jake coming back down in pit lane. There was sort of fist bumping the bike. I wonder if there was an issue. He's obviously topping the session, so I ran across and it was no, just pure joy. They obviously found something that was missing in the last few races on that Boscura. They're feeling high fives around when he came into the box, and he's gone out pretty quickly as well. He's in a rush to try and break any slipstream that people are trying to get off him. So Dixon really pleased at this moment in time with his feeling on that bike.
There's been some real ups and downs, hasn't there, in this 25 campaign for Jake Dixon. He did have a new telemetry engineer in Hungary after some of the struggles that he had encountered in the previous 2 races in Brno and in Austria. Qualifying 20th in Austria and then finishing 20th, he felt that something really did have to change or break to recover some confidence and feeling. And that was very much evident in Hungary, and some people in the team, within the team, were saying that Jake was very much content and happy with how things were going earlier today, reflected in his time so far. Could be looking at the first pole position since the Sachsenring in the German Grand Prix, but we're still some way to go, and it's a big 4 minutes coming up from this rider here, Diogo Moreira. Rather fancy if he wants to make further ground on both Gonzalez and Canet in the championship fight. He's going to need to pull his finger out in these last couple of minutes here. He won't be challenging them from back in 17th on the grid.
As he demonstrated back at the Sachsenring, he certainly knows how to get some overtakes done, although he got a little bit carried away for his own good, didn't he, in the end, given how that Grand Prix ended for the Brazilian. Certainly won't want to be starting that far down the field on purpose. There he is, just in the centre of the picture, and the field now leaving pit lane, doing a very good job of staying well out of the way of Olgado and Sasaki, who make their way into turn one. We have already seen some antics like that in MotoGP qualifying the other one today, which certainly didn't please Xavier Di Gianantonio during qualifying one. It's upon you as you leave the pit lane to have a good look over your shoulder and make sure that you don't block someone who's coming down the main straight on a timed lap. Jake Dixon then into the heart of turns 6 and 7. And now the right-hander of 8 leads us into turn 9. Plenty of commitment through there. Third gear on a Moto2 bike, around about 130 kilometers an hour as the yellow flags come out somewhere, I think, just ahead of them. And it is, in fact, it's just behind him. It's Celestino Vietti who is already favouring his shoulder there. Our airbag, of course, has gone off for Chele. Turn 5 has brought an end to his session. He won't be improving on 11th place.
Here we see what happened, and well, he was by himself on the track. You could just see the front tire going as he tried to bring it in to the gravel there. I wonder if he's just tweaked his left shoulder the way he got up and made a movement there. Insinuated that he wasn't in the most comfortable of feelings there. So Vietti's session is over, unfortunately.
Real shame that for Munoz. He just did a 1:41.461. Unfortunately, he exceeded track limits. Danny Munoz, had he kept himself within the confines of the racetrack, that would have put him on pole position.
Yeah, it would have been a full 4/10 faster than the previous lap record as well. And Danny Holgado has just lowered it further, a 41.549. Sensational stuff from Holgado to jump up one position and take provisional pole away from Jake Dixon. Holgado has been one of the stars of this weekend so far in Moto2. And demonstrating yet again that over a single flying lap, he is absolutely peerless.
If you've been watching it so far this weekend, you'll know that is no fluke. Jake Dixon has lost time somewhere. He had just put up a relatively strong first sector. You can see on the left-hand side of your screens, the red bars next to the rider's name indicate that they're overall fastest. Orange means personal best, and grey means they are not doing anything you should really pay much attention to. Slower than they've been so far. Holgado is just getting faster and faster on this current lap. And he's absolutely supreme, isn't he, at the moment? Yellow's out again in the second sector. Represent the potential that he's got on board that IO machine. As the yellow flags are out down at turn 4 for some reason, and the reason is the second of the Speed RS Boscoscuros who've gone down in consecutive laps. First Celestino Vietti and now Alonso Lopez.
Yeah, and that will be a frustration for Diogo Moreira, still down in 17th. I think he may have caught those yellow flags in sector number 2. He isn't on a personal best lap time anyway. And then Danny Munoz has just jumped up into 4th. So brilliant stuff for the stand-in rider. Still deputising for Denis Onju, of course, in the Red Bull KTM IO squad. And he is showing that he is deserving of a place on the full-time grid in 2026, which we imagine is going to happen.
So lap time's being cancelled everywhere you look, and there's a group of riders, as you can see on the track map, who are in that final sector who might just get to the finish line for one more lap, although it was Danny Munoz who told us yesterday that these Pirelli tyres in qualifying trim may be only good for a couple of fast laps, and of course they've had to back off twice now due to yellow flags. Holgado has just set up another fastest first sector. This is Alonso Lopez, and looked like this lap might have already gone away because he was looking behind him. And the crash that he suffered is going to be a rather gentle drop in the gravel trap after he overshot turn 4.
The gravel just gets a bit deeper there, and Lopez is over and out for this session. But this this one is by no means over. We've got 6 different riders on potential fastest lap times, including Diogo Moreira.
Crucially, 17th at the moment in this session. Just anything he can do to lift himself up the order from there could be all important. Holgado then, who did a 41.5, of course, which currently puts him on provisional pole. He then backed that up with a 41.6 on the next lap, just underlining that he isn't just a rider who could just put in a banzai. He's been super quick every time he's been on the racetrack this weekend. Colin Vaya's also up halfway around the lap, so a fellow rookie might be taking aim at Holgado's provisional pole. Unfortunately for Jake Dixon, it doesn't look as if he's going to be on pole position. His final lap has been completed. He doesn't improve, but keep an eye on Moreira, keep an eye on Vaya, both going super quickly.
Yeah, you can see on your timing screens, Moreira is entering into turn 10. He's 0.2 of a second off through split number 3, so he's lost a bit of time. It looks as though Moreira is going to be struggling to get into the top 10 here.
Yeah, current estimation P12. That's because the field is so close. Right on board with the Brazilian now. The only other rider improving is Senna Agius, who's also setting some personal bests as he tries to lift himself up from 11th on the grid and getting himself onto the front 3 rows of the grid. We follow Moreira then through the final corner. This could be a key lap. Where is he going to be relative to his other championship rivals? As Agius goes 6th, Moreira goes 12th. He's only 1 place behind Manu Gonzalez, by the way. Colin Vaya goes onto the front row of the grid on the 95. We've got rookies 1st and 3rd on the grid for this Catalan Grand Prix, but the form that he's been demonstrating throughout free practice has been fully backed up. That is no surprise. Danny Holgado, who started from pole position back in Austria, now officially takes his first pole in Moto2.
Yeah, and fully deserved it was. That was absolutely no fluke. Danny Holgado was the fastest name yesterday. The fastest name this morning, in fact, I should say. He was 2nd fastest at the end of play yesterday, and he has sealed the deal in qualifying with a new all-time lap record of 41.5, some 0.4 of a second faster than what we had previously. And Holgado is showing that he's not the only rookie down in that Aspar squad that is capable of securing race victories. He will probably start potentially as the pre-race favourite tomorrow, but Jake Dixon will be among those names being discussed for victory as well. Really solid performance that from the Englishman, and 1 or 2 of our championship contenders, Lewis, in fact all 3 of them are looking at a pretty difficult start to tomorrow's race.
Aaron Canet 9th, Manu Gonzalez 12th, Diogo Moreira 13th on the grid. They are in the middle of the midfield mayhem as they run down to turn 1, which is usually a casino at the best of times, with the near 1 kilometre run down to the first corner. They're all going to be in the thick of the unpredictable pack tomorrow. Holgado first official Moto2 pole of his career. Dixon 2nd. Vaya a first front row for the IO team 3rd. Arenas, who was nowhere in Q1 at the start of the day, 4th. Baltas 5th. Danny Munoz 6th for the Red Bull KTM squad, his best Moto2 qualifying. And then it's Salach Agius Canet on the 3rd row. Sasaki Lopez Gonzalez is your 4th row of the grid. Moreira, Guevara, Vietti on row 5, with David Alonso looking to launch another Sunday comeback. This time he has to come from 16th place.
Yeah, and unsurprisingly, the times were exceptionally tight yet again. Half a second covering the top 13 in Moto2 qualifying. I cannot imagine it being much closer than that on this 4.6 kilometre Barcelona circuit. Holgado the star of the session, but Danny Munoz in 6th has to be one of the standout names, as Albert Arenas as well, coming through Q1, as you just mentioned previously, Lewis. But Holgado, it must have been tough to watch his teammate get all that applause and acclaim and win a Moto2 race before he managed to do so 2 weeks ago. He has shown exemplary speed right away through this weekend, taking his first Moto2 pole. He is going to be right in the running. That's Paul Espargaro, I think, who's down there working for Spanish broadcaster DAZN, offering up his congratulations.
Hasn't been out of the top 2 in any session this weekend. As Danny Holgado, if you beat him, you win the Grand Prix tomorrow on the form we've seen so far, but a rather cheesed off Manu Gonzalez by the looks of it. The World Championship leader generally only qualifies that far down the grid if he crashes in qualifying or if some weather interferes. 18th on the grid in Aragon when he did crash, 16th on the grid at the Sachsenring, of course, when we had a rain-affected qualifying. Other than that, that is his worst qualifying of the season.
Yeah, desperately disappointing stuff, but on each of those two previous occasions you mentioned, Lewis, he did manage to come back and post fairly strong point-scoring results. So it might be a case of damage limitation for the championship leader here tomorrow. A little crumb of comfort will be the fact that Aaron Canet is not a million miles away, just 4 places ahead of him on the grid. In fact, 3 places ahead of him. But what about that for Colin Bayer? Such a steady improvement for him over the last couple of races. His qualifying results bear that out. The last 4, Colin has qualified 16th, then 9th, then 5th, and now 3rd. His first front row in the intermediate category. Colin most certainly has worked this Moto2 game out. Brilliant to see.
Well, it's not purely a young man's game in Moto2. Jake Dixon will certainly be keen to remind us of that. He starts between the 2 rookies on the front row of the grid. Pace was super hot in that qualifying session. The all-time lap record at the start of the session of Sergio Garcia was beaten by 10 riders all the way down to Yumi Sasaki, who does qualify 10th on a 141.8. But pole position for the very first time in Moto2 is taken by Danny Holgado. He's giving his thoughts now to
Danny, congratulations. What a lap time for your first pole position, and to do it in Barcelona must feel pretty special. You must be confident ahead of tomorrow's race as well to potentially claim your first victory.
Yes, I'm very happy with my first pole position and in my Grand Prix home. Very happy with the performance during the weekend, because yesterday I was second, today I was the fastest rider on the track. This is super good for me. I'm glad from the team, because they are working very good after the Hungarian GP. Yeah, ready for tomorrow. I need only enjoy the race. Let's see tomorrow, we can do it.
Top job, good luck for tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Well, the best way to enjoy is to win, and I think Danny Holgado has given himself a really good chance of doing that tomorrow. Yeah, the all-time lap record absolutely destroyed by, as mentioned, over half the riders that took part in that Q2 session. Yes, the likes of Salat, Chagius, Canet, Sasaki, who set a lap time that 20 minutes ago would have been an all-time new lap record. As it is, they start off the front 2 rows of the grid. For the number 27, it's pole position number 1 in Moto2. We've seen him lead Moto2 races this season as early as Qatar back in April. We've seen him on the podium, we've now seen him on pole position. It's tomorrow the day when we see him take the first Moto2 victory and follow in the footsteps of his baby goat teammate David Alonso, who did exactly the same a fortnight ago. Holgado on pole for the Catalan Grand Prix. Jake Dixon takes 2nd place, and a first front row since the Sachsenring for him. Colin Bayer ensuring the 2 rookies start from the front row of the grid. Albert Arenas at 4th via Q1 from Barry Baltus and the impressive Danny Munoz. Salat, Chagius and Canet, the 3rd row. Canet the first of the title chasers on the grid. Sasaki 10th from Lopez. Gonzalez and Moreira start next to each other, 12th and 13th, with Ivan Cavara and Celestino Vietti and a pair of Oscar-Scuros right behind. David Alonso 16th ahead of Ivan Altola, Joe Roberts and Alex Escridge, who narrowly missed out in Q1. Ramirez, Van den Gorberg, Anchi Huertas and Arbolino take us down to 24. Poor showing for the 14. Unai Radre, Yuki Kuni, Darren Binder and Eric Fernandez completing your field of 28 who set times in qualifying. Jorge Navarro did not, after he crashed very early in Q1. So first pole position in Moto2 for Danny Holgado. We turn our attentions though next to the TISO Sprint. 12 laps ahead of us in MotoGP. Stay right where you are.